I'm Andrew Kitley, and this is my podcast, The Invisible Gift, a show about turning disability into possibility. From a young age, I was told I had a disability that would make it impossible for me to achieve and flourish in life. I struggled in school and felt I was not truly understood or supported. On my long road to becoming the owner of multiple businesses, I have learned that dyslexia was not my disability, but rather my invisible gift. My dyslexia challenged me every day, but it was also what made me into an independent thinker, a creative, and gave me that hard-working mindset that has taught me to never be discouraged by failure. I realised there are many people out there just like me. So I wanted to learn more about them and dyslexia itself. I realised I needed a way to do this which was great for dyslexics, which obviously rules out writing anything down and makes total sense why a podcast is perfect. I'm excited to be sharing this journey with you as we learn more about dyslexia, the incredible people that thrive with it, and how we can all transform our greatest challenge into our invisible gift. Welcome to my podcast. Today I'm joined by photographer Jon Holloway. Jon is one of the leading portrait photographers in the UK. His career has brought him all kinds of opportunities, including shoots with famous actors, writers and media personalities. Jon has also been creating a neurodiversity project highlighting the power and positivity of neurodiverse individuals. During our conversation, we spoke extensively about his career and life as a photographer, our experiences in school, and shared our biggest grievances as dyslexics. But first, I asked Jon how COVID has affected him, and we deep dived into his photography career. Hope you enjoy the episode.
Photography, you couldn't have really, in my mind, picked a harder, more competitive part of life. Every time someone says to me, I do a lot of mentoring, and I've had a couple of people say, I want to be a photographer, and I instantly think, ouch. There's got to be a million photographers for one available slot for being one, right?
Yeah, true. So in my full-time art course, I would have loved to have been probably a fine artist, fine art painter. But in that room at the time, there were two people that were better than me at sixth form college. I mean, we were doing a full-time art course. Of course, they were fantastic. And honestly, I could show you one of the guys' work now, and he's a concept artist for games, and it's just phenomenal what comes out of his head and into a computer Wacom tablet, you know. And so there were two people in that room, him being one of them and Hannah being the other. Not that anyone cares, but in case she's listening to it, you were amazing. And both of them made me realise, not that I was bad, because I was very good, but I realised that I have not got a great career path, trajectory ahead of me if at sixth form college there's people that are better than me. Whereas I was, when we went in to do the photography module, the best at photography. So for me, although for you it feels like a pie in the sky kind of like, oh my God, isn't it so competitive? The thing is, I walked into the room and I was really good at it to start with. And then I learned it's quite a technical process, which my brain is very good at, technical problem solving, working things out. So that it became very adept at photography and working with that medium. At the time, it was in film and black and white mainly, and then progressing through. But I was always the best. I was the best in that room. I then went to art college, and I'm not going to say I was the best at art college because we were all so different, but I was really good. So I always knew that I'd work.
So being a photographer, how's COVID affecting you?
The first bit was absolutely dire. Like I can imagine for every freelancer I knew, the phone just stopped ringing for 3 months or so. But then you kind of realise that a lot of people have been waiting. And as soon as the restrictions started getting lifted a bit and you were able to work, essentially, I had a load of, the phone went off the hook for a little bit and had loads of work. Then it died off a bit because obviously those people that have been waiting Yes, and now it kind of comes in waves. So like then quieten down for a couple of weeks, and then another couple of weeks of really busyness. It's steady. I'm earning less than half than I was before. But at the same time, what I'm earning right now is livable. And if it carries on like this, then I'm okay. And how lovely for me to be okay. But I have diversified quite a bit as well.
That's interesting. What have you done?
Basically, the beginning of COVID, my wife's a writer and an actor. So we were stuck with the kids, not making work, not producing anything for at least 6 weeks. All I was doing was the occasional bits of retouching, or I did one remote shoot actually, which was kind of interesting. But so in the midst of that, we decided to make a pitch for my wife's a TV writer anyway. We decided to make a pitch for a lockdown drama that we then made part of. So we made a few scenes of it. I filmed it. I did all the sound, the lighting. She wrote it, and we co-directed it. She was in it with the kids. And then when things loosened up a tiny bit, we were able to get another actor round who cycled over, and we socially distanced in the garden to film them as well, to film him. So that was, I'd already done bits of filming anyway, but it became a bit of a baptism of fire, that was. So out the other side of that, I've now ended up doing a lot more moving image and editing as well. So I had to buy myself a bit of a singing or dancing computer so I can edit 4K footage. But now I'm a bit of a one-stop shop for moving image and stills, but a lot more than I kind of... Before it was, can you do moving image? And I'm like, yeah, sure. Yeah, of course. Like, of course. And it was talking heads and things like that. So it's like what I do for a living, but just the talking version, which was fine. Whereas now it's proper filming, editing, whether it's like tomorrow's job is a baker. So I'm filming her doing the kind of different steps and things like that of quite a lot of processes, because she's taking a load of her stuff online. So it's the instructional videos for that, and I'm doing all of that and a load of stills. So yeah, I've kind of had to diversify a bit in that sense.
So would you say, because that's a pivot, right? Would you say pivot in something that you've always done from a young age?
Definitely. I suppose your brain gets very adept because of the dyslexia at learning other ways to do things, in the sense of, I can't read, but if I can distract you by my drawing skills at school or my something else, maybe people won't notice quite as much how bad this is, because look how good this other thing is. And I think I've probably followed that into the rest of my career. So in a sense, pivoting is easy.
When did you find out you were dyslexic?
When I was 7, I was an early one, which was amazing for me. When I was 7, they kind of pulled me, and I think my parents, to one side and said, there's something up here, because his ability to communicate and understand verbal instructions is incredibly good, whereas his ability to communicate in written format is abysmal. And because they were so worlds apart for me, I was very lucky for that to be picked up so early, and them to notice that he's clever, but he cannot write for toffee.
So how old are you?
I'm 36.
Right. So I'm 37. So actually, I got mine was diagnosed when I was 7 as well. So I think we were right at the right point where I think teachers were starting. So that's interesting, because now they're starting to catch it at 5, and when I speak to older people over 40, it's a lot later. It's when they're 12, 14 sort of time. So it's interesting. So what? Then you'll probably share quite similar experiences to me. What was your early experiences at school of dyslexia, and how the school dealt with it?
In theory, the process, it was kind of right to start with. They they would they kind of essentially not make you do everything that everyone else was doing. So your spellings were different. You had different books to read. You had, well, which kids do anyway, but looking at my daughter now, it's very obvious that the whole class does all the spellings, and I don't think they have different spellings for any kids that are struggling. They just can all have their own ability with the same words. At the moment, their spellings aren't too difficult, but they're getting there. Things like words like because and things like that, and quite big ones, and tricky words that don't fit like phonics rules and things. Basically. A different way of doing here's cat, dog, and two, and everyone else is spelling 8-10 letter words. But it didn't feel that well done, because I remember throughout the entirety of schooling, I pushed back on it, and in university education as well. You'd be given the special things to do, the special classes. You come outside to do other things. Oh, look, everyone's doing reading now. You can leave the room, that kind of thing. And I don't, and then I'd push back against it. I don't need to leave the room. I'm better than everyone else. I think it was quite difficult.
So for me, I was creative in drama at school. That was my outlet. I was terrible at art. Absolutely terrible at art. You wouldn't want to see anything I've painted. I assume that your school life was quite creative in most aspects. Is that correct?
Yeah, very much so. I would, art and drama were my main kind of subjects up until GCSE, and then I started to, when I had to pick between the two of them, when I say had to pick, when I was going, these are my two favourite subjects that I love, that I spend all my time doing extracurricular things, leads in school plays, and also painting the scenery. I had to pick. I felt like I had to pick one, and just my dyslexia pushed that decision. I decided to pick the one that I presumed was less reading, because reading scripts and plays and things. I mean, my wife's an actor. Doing table reads is honestly the most scary thought I could ever imagine. A cold read of something, as in you've never seen it before. And obviously with dyslexia, people know in theory you can get sent something the week before, so it's not a cold read for you. But then you just got to do shed loads of work that no one else has to do, because they can just read. So I'm very pleased that I picked this job, definitely.
I completely agree. People always ask me to, if I'm going to do a presentation or talk to people, people will say, oh, can you write down what you're going to say first, or show me what you're going to do? And I'm like, no, I have no idea. And everyone's like, how'd you do it? And I said, I couldn't imagine sitting there writing it out. There's no way what I write down will come out verbally. It has to be natural, and it has to be relaxed. Otherwise, I close up and I will start reading like a robot, like how my name is. And then I start struggling with smaller words like the. I mean, it all goes crazy after that.
Yeah, and then you come out the other side of it and go, I can't remember a single thing that just happened to me, because your whole vision goes, your mind goes, the nerves take a hold of you. Whereas, I suppose it's like a muscle, isn't it? You whatever you're practiced at, and if you're practiced at giving presentations off the hoof, then no real biggie, because you've done plenty of them, and you've flexed that muscle plenty of times and know what you're doing.
How comes photography? What made you pick photography? Because I love photography. I'm useless at it myself. But I think I always look at people's photography, and I think you can always tell a really good photographer because they catch something in the moment. And what is it that drew you to that particular thing? I've
always had quite a methodical brain. So when I picked between art and drama, I followed an art route and went, right, okay, at the moment I want to be a set builder. I was really into theatre at the time anyway, probably because of the drama side of things. Went to sixth form college, and I got onto this course that was a full-time art course where you did everything. You did ceramics, you did graphic design, you did life drawing, you did photography. You did absolutely like a module in anything you can think of to do with art, and it was a full-time course. We were there for I don't know how many, like was it 7 hours, 6-7 hours a day, 5 days a week. So we had a lot of art. Like we'd learned a lot, and at the time I would have been a sculptor, I think, but I hated my sculpture tutor. We didn't get on. We clashed. I would have been amazing. I would have been a great sculptor if it wasn't for Dave. Even though I loved sculpture and it probably would have been my favourite subject, I think that Dave essentially put me off it, and I pushed back. And I was 16, 17 at the time. I didn't need to be pushing back in classes. I chose to be there. I could be down the refectory chatting up girls if I chose not to be in a class. No one really cared if we were in them or not, because it was our choice. But but I used to push back in his class, and I used to get things like sent out like I was still at school because, as I say, we didn't get on. Therefore, I think there's this. I don't know what it is, but I think I found in a lot of dyslexic friends. And I think it links also to the kind of autistic side of things as well. I'm a believer that dyslexia, ADHD, dyspraxia, autism, Asperger's or it's all within a spectrum. And you do notice a lot of the tendencies from one person to the next. Like, I haven't met a dyslexic that hasn't got slight autistic tendencies when you start digging. But essentially, I think that because we've pushed back on a lot of things in our lives throughout the years, or avoiding doing certain things, or whatever we've had to do to cope with our different abilities, or make our different abilities work within a classroom environment, we're very experienced at pushing back. We're very good at it. And after a while it's like, again, back to flexing those muscles. I didn't care if a teacher sent me out of the room or stood me on a table or to try and embarrass me. It didn't work. I just stood there and took it and didn't care, and then came back for more the next day because you broke the rules, and I'm going to push and I'll keep pushing. I think that's why I ended up freelance, I think.
I agree with that as well. Obviously, it's a legal requirement that you go to primary school and secondary school, so the teachers had to put up with me. And I remember I left school and I wanted to go work, and my mum and dad said, look, just have 1 year at college and see if you want to do it. They weren't big on education themselves, but they said, look, just because after that you're going to have to work for the rest of your life, you might as well have 1 year doing what you want. And I remember I started college and I treated it like school, like I had to be there. And I remember I was working in Asda at night and working all through the night, and then going to college during the day. And I used to drive a moped at the time, and I fell asleep on my moped one morning and ended up in a field. And I remember I got into the class late, and I never went to classes anyway. I was just there socializing, having a good time. And my college lecturer said to me, and it was really shocked me because obviously teachers don't swear. He said, Andrew, why the fuck are you here? And I was like, what? He went, this is college. If you don't want to be here, don't come. I don't want to teach you if you're not going to come in. He said, you're working at night and you're coming to college in the day and doing nothing. There's no point you doing both things. And he was like, so either you start coming to your classes or don't bother coming back. And I remember thinking, wow. And I didn't come back. That was it.
I really related to Jon's frustration with schools and teachers. I think so many dyslexics feel similar growing up. It's such a struggle being understood as a teenager in general, let alone when you're also dyslexic. Coming up, Jon and I talk about his really exciting neurodiversity project and his plans for it in the future. I asked Jon if he thinks there's a connection between dyslexia and being able to deal with adversity. This is what he said.
Do you find that your dyslexia helps you deal with tougher times? Because for me, I really find that when stuff's going shit, I don't really worry about it. And that might just be a character But I just find that most the dyslexic people I talk to don't seem to really worry about when things are going wrong, because things are always going wrong in some regards.
Yeah, I've never really thought about that, but I at all that my dyslexia might help me deal with the harder times. But I very much don't worry about them because they end up sorting themselves out, right? Whether that be being a freelancer in COVID or the beginnings of starting out in an incredibly competitive job. I've worked it out. It's worked itself out. I put a lot of effort into working it out when it's difficult, those decisions seem to pay off. And maybe I don't really worry about it. I don't think I do. And I think you've just given me some kind of revelation. Life's been so difficult because of an inability to read and communicate as well as I'd like to. Therefore, nothing else, everything else will be fine.
You do photography, it's a kind of, I assume it's a side project, correct me if I'm wrong, for neurodiversity photography. Is that correct?
Yep. It's a project that I've been doing for a few years now. I had this idea of a portrait project a few years ago, where I wanted to photograph people that are doing well, like you're doing with this podcast. I wanted to photograph people and meet people that were on the kind of autistic spectrum, whether that be, so neurodivergent people. So that's dyslexia, dyspraxia, ADHD, autism, a few others as well. And I just wanted to photograph people of note, people that are doing incredibly well with these, what I used to think of before this project as difficulties in their life, whereas now I think of them as extraordinary abilities, because they help us see differently and work differently, and they come with their trials and tribulations, but I wanted to create this project of people of note that were aspiring characters. Basically, I created it because I wanted the 10-year-old me to see these portraits and hear these stories of these people and go, it's okay to find it this difficult because you can be this good. So that's the project, and I need help with it essentially, because the admin side of tracking all these people down is quite difficult when you're dyslexic, and also the financial commitment of having to photograph all these people and taking the time out of working. So essentially I need funding and a bit of help, production, admin help with the project. So if anyone out there wants to get in touch with you, to get in touch with me, or just go straight onto my website and if they want to help me, that would be amazing.
I actually think there might be something there in the fact that, do you know that schools now I've spoken to younger people with dyslexia, schools now have rooms where dyslexic people go for extra help. So they have, on the rooms where they can go, they have photos on the wall of successful dyslexic people in all walks of life. And they point out that it's basically to show that dyslexic people that you can achieve amazing things with this, which some people at our age would have never had, right? So they say they have things like Albert Einstein and Richard Branson, but they also have normal people, like local success stories. So I think there's something there, because there's dyslexic charities that will be actually really interested in doing that and working with schools as well. So
I've actually been in contact with the BDA about it, and the National Autistic Society, who ended up getting me to do a talk, and lots of other things have happened because of the project, but the project needs a bit of help. So
when you're taking these photos, what are you looking for when you take these photos? Because I'm interested in this now. So you're taking photos of these people. What are you trying to? Because for a lot of people listening, photography is photography, but we know when you're from the creative side, you're trying to capture a moment in a moment. And I don't know if I sound like right. I don't know if I'm sounding like a dickhead saying that, by the way.
I mean, I mean, it depends. Like, I mean, if you're talking Henri Cartier-Bresson and the decisive moment, or whether you're actually just talking about, you do capture a moment in time. It's usually a series of moments in time because you don't take 3 pictures, you take quite a few. Most of the time when I'm taking people's portraits for this project and for other portraits, any portraiture really, it's about learning about the person. So I'm provoking, I'm listening, I'm asking leading questions. It's almost, some like an interview sometimes. It's like you ask a question and see where it goes. And it's getting to know people. So essentially I get to know people, but I just have a camera in front of me when I do it. With the neurodiversity project, it's very much about, it's not just getting to know people, it's being educated. And I come away, every single shoot that I do, every single session that happens, with that project, I come away elated because I found a brilliant, inspiring person who is dyslexic or dyspraxic or autistic, and they're telling me not only about their abilities or their inabilities, but they're letting me in and educating me at the same time. And I just come away elated. It's such a fantastic project to do because I get to meet these amazing people and have the right conversations with them, I suppose. And not that the portraits have to take a long period of time, but all of them so far have taken quite a lengthy amount of time, mainly because we get chatting. And I've just happened to have a camera in front of me, and I try and do it in as little kind of intrusive kind of way as possible. So we talk about where we're going to do it. Sometimes it's a case of we're already here. Sometimes it's a case of, let's move a bit, over there, let's set the scene a little bit. And then I'll set the camera up on a tripod often, and I won't be looking through it all the time. I'd just be chatting to them, and I just have my thumb on the shutter button, and I'm just occasionally taking pictures when I think it's kind of what's coming from them is working. And sometimes they stop talking for a bit, you bang off a couple of shots, and then you carry on, and it's a lovely experience.
And so what's the plan with the photos once they're taken? What is the end result? If you're going to say, this is what I want.
Incrementally, I want to fill galleries. So first off, it'll be like a small gallery, and you fill all the walls, and you kind of create a space that you are just surrounded by these beautiful stories. It will need to be spaces that are also lit in particular ways, so that I want to cater for everyone that I'm talking to and about, and that could be connected to. So, obviously, like I would be talking to like the National Autistic Society on how to curate the spaces so the lighting's right, so that people are affected by. So, if your autism you're massively affected by light and sound and things like that, it would be a safe space for everyone. Same with the dyslexics. Reading isn't going to be a thing. I love going to exhibitions, and I hate seeing huge bodies of text that I don't want to go to a gallery and spend 90% of my time reading it, and then only 10% looking at the artwork or the pictures or whatever it might be. But I want to hear the stories. So I think there's going to be a lot of things that will have to be app-based as well. Scan the QR code, listen to this through your own headphones, whatever it is. Eventually, I want to fill the turbine hall with them. Mm-hmm. And I want to fill that space in 10 years' time. Like, not quite floor to ceiling, because honestly, like, you can't even see the top of the ceiling, but just fill it with picture after picture after picture and story after story, so that, school groups can come in, and the ones with dyslexia can be like, all of these people over here are dyslexic, and someone who's autistic can be like, oh my God, these people are living with what I have to live with and producing amazing work. And I think part of it might be collaborative as well. Like, I've worked with some of the artists where, like Jon, one of the ones that I photographed, he is a fantastic artist, and he produced some work for me on the spot while I was, like, just after I did his portrait. And so I think it's a big project. It's got a lot of scope, a lot of vision. I want to send it on tour as well. But basically, incrementally, I want to fill larger and larger spaces with a huge amount of portraits and stories of these wonderful people and what they're doing.
I get that because, see, there's a vision behind what you're trying to do. And for me, dyslexia is something that can be amazing. I've said to a few people who I've spoken to, what would you say is your dyslexic superpower? What's it giving you? And a lot of people feel uncomfortable with that, but I strongly believe it's a superpower. When I sit there and talk to people, and they're like, "Oh, I don't know how you do all this." So I only found out 2 weeks ago that I have ADHD. I spoke to someone on one of my podcasts, and they said most people with dyslexia also have some other condition, and like you said, ADHD, dyspraxia, some form of autism. And I thought, right, okay.
I think I've got some form of autism, very, very mild, but I think there's something there, definitely.
And so I went and took a test, and I am on the high end of I have ADHD. And I told my mum at the weekend, and she went, "God, I could have told you that. You don't shut up." It's the first thing she said. She was like, that's the most unnewsworthy thing I've ever heard. Anyone that's ever known you, you can't sit still. You don't shut up. You're non-stop. You're more obviously ADHD than you are dyslexic.
This project Jon's been working on is an incredible idea. Confidence is so important for people with a neurodiversity. We're forced to adapt to a world that isn't very accommodating to us, and then routinely we're misunderstood. This podcast is all about highlighting the strength of those people, and the way Jon is approaching the subject is so unique, refreshing and exciting. Next up, I asked Jon about his goals for the future, and we share our frustration with one of the worst questions you can ask a dyslexic.
I expect you to be the shy, artistic type, but you're the more flamboyant, artistic type.
Yeah, interestingly, so when I was at sixth form college, they had one of those like the whole room, one of those big rooms. They invited loads of universities round to. They have stands, and you walk around talking to representatives from universities. And there was one guy who there was an art college there, or at least a university that had a photography department. And the guy the representative from them, who happened to be connected to it. I can't remember what he was, but and I said to him that I was thinking about doing photography, and he chatted to me for a minute or so and went, "Yeah, the thing is, like, we don't really. I don't think you're really suited to photography because you're very outgoing, and we prefer someone on our course that likes to watch and see things unfold, as opposed to try like helping them unfold or being part of it." And that was completely demoralizing for me at the time, because so what do you mean I'm too outgoing to do my job? And now that I'm a professional photographer, like, it's the most successful professional photographers. Obviously there's quite a few exceptions to the rule, but generally they're pretty flamboyant personalities.
Yeah.
In varying ways and forms. Like, some are more introverted, but they've still got this interesting personality that shines through. You don't get, the top photographers are not people that just let things unfold and skulk around in corners. Of course, anyone can skulk around in a corner. I have to do it on a regular basis when I'm doing documentary. And you turn it off for a bit, and then as soon as you drop the camera and or walking out of the space, you can turn it back on again. Or sometimes you then can watch things unfold and then influence them, which is great to have both skills instead of not having half of what you need to make things happen.
We've obviously spoken about a bit more of the past. So what's, apart from your goals for the neurodiversity stuff, what's your other goals in the next 12 months?
Oh, well, the next 12 months is interesting because it is very much about making sure that I can pay the mortgage and pay the nursery fees and things for through COVID, so whereas before I could pick and choose a bit of work, where now it's a case of I'm taking the work essentially. But I am working on a couple of documentary projects, so I've kind of shifted myself into a bit of a documentary filmmaker. So I'm doing one at the moment, which is about toxicity in the online gaming world, of which I am not part of, but I've been introduced to recently, and it's a fascinating world. So I'm making a pitch for that at the moment, which I'm taking to games companies, hoping to get funding to kind of explore the world a lot more. I've got a couple of other documentaries that I'm making.
Do you find that with the growth of Netflix, especially smaller documentaries, because I love the Netflix documentaries, there's actually seems to be more demand for it, or more of a market for it now?
I think so, and I think that's why I'm moving into it, because I love them. There's a lot of people that love them, and people they're going out less, and they're bored with watching whatever your genre of choice is. Let's say you love a sci-fi drama, fantasy thing, or whatever. There's only so much. I love those kind of things. I love a lot of different types of telly, but there's only so much you can watch of certain things. At one point, I actually deleted my profile on Netflix because it just kept on showing me the same old stuff, and I just created a new profile. It was like, right, I'm going to watch this thing, this this food documentary, then I'm going to watch something about like the 1930s, then I'm going to watch a really old film, and I cherry picked a few random things to start watching just to see what it started suggesting, and it was so enlightening. But yeah, I think there is more of a market for it, and especially the filming world's looking for low budget, COVID safe ways of working as well. So low production costs. So that fits me to a T, because I am a bit of a one man band who likes working with other people. So, if and when I need to bring a sound person on board, or maybe a director, or like when projects escalate, I love working in teams with people that are good at their jobs, and that love what they do as well.
What is your advice as a successful person to give dyslexic people or people with neurodiversity issues out there? What would your advice be to a younger person and who's concerned about their future because of these perceived disabilities? What would you say to them?
I'd say that they're definitely not disabilities, because it's like the flip side of the same coin. I mean, one person might see something as a disability, and the other side of that coin is you have all these other abilities. Like it's learning where your strengths are. Like, I didn't know that, like, you talked about problem solving. I'm an incredible problem solver, which is why, photography and film they're essentially a series of lots and lots of problems, just one after the other, and you're just permanently solving them. But I didn't so I knew that was because of my dyslexia, but I didn't know that. I found out a few years ago that I can picture the other side of an object. I can look at anything on this desk in front of me or around me, and I can pick it up in my head and move it around and imagine what the other side of it looks like. I might not know, because I might have never seen the other side of it, but I could give you my brain has a good picture of what it could look like. Or if I know what the thing looks like, then I can flip it up around, move it side to side. I mean, you probably get this in engineering quite a lot. But I didn't know this isn't common. I just thought nearly everyone could do it. Obviously, I didn't think that people that had bad spatial awareness could do it, but I thought anyone that could design or could that had great spatial awareness could pick stuff up in their head and move it. And I found out recently that it's really uncommon.
You're making me look around the room. I'm looking around the room at the moment at random things, trying to flip it.
And you're picking up and are you flipping them over?
I've got a 4-hammer here.
Well, it is exactly the same on the other side. So
yeah.
but but it's just learning what your abilities are, I think. And I try to concentrate as little as possible on what I find difficult. I will find easier routes. Like someone said, "Oh, can you make me a presentation?" I'm having to make loads of presentation documents at the moment, like for funding to pitch for ideas, essentially pitch documents, and they're pages of writing, pages plural. They're not my forte, but sometimes, like at the moment, I'm like, well, maybe I'll just throw a video into one because that is my forte, and you fill it with pictures because those are my forte. And why not put on the doc that I'm dyslexic and these aren't my forte? Because it's not, and why should I be judged? If you saw that on a doc, you might look at it and say you probably wouldn't look at it like that, but a neuronormal or a neurotypical person might look at a pitch document and say from a dyslexic and be like, well, they spelt a lot of words wrong and it's quite short, and they judge it. Whereas if you put on there, I'm dyslexic, this isn't my forte, but I'm really good at the stuff that I want you to fund or that I'm pitching to you for, they might just go, hang on, yeah, that's a really good point. I'm not funding, this person's not applying for money to make pitch documents. They're applying for money to take pictures. So why am I judging them based on their pitch documents? Like, do you know what? I might put a video in or whatever it is. Do you see what I mean? So it's just playing to your strengths and knowing what they are and being like, I'm really good at this. I'm going to get so good at it that it's unbelievable that no one else is as good as me. And therefore the other stuff doesn't matter. So then you just concentrate on your superpowers instead of your kryptonite.
Wow. Like that kryptonite. You've just reminded me of a story about when you said about you having to write documents. I contacted a dyslexic charity before I started this podcast, because I just wanted to speak to him. And the manager or CEO of
send me an email.
Dyslexic charity asked me to put a document together so they could they could have a look at it.
And if they're not going to change the language, or if they're not going to change the dialogue, I had a go at someone at the British Dyslexic Association when I called them for help and advice, and they said, "Put it in can you write me an email?" And it's like, if you guys are saying put it in an email, then how are we meant to change the world in any way or form?
Do you know what?
If you're the ones that are meant to be helping and you're doing what everyone else does.
Ironically, the questions I wanted to ask that person, she had answered with that email. As soon as she sent that email back, can you put it into a document? I had all the answers I needed, because my questions was going to be, how do the world treat people with dyslexia? How do organisations put in? And as soon as that come back, I was like, I know, because I put up with this every day. And I saw that and I was like, wow, that's coming from a charity. So
I mean, that charity, if they could, it's difficult, but surely the conversation should start with, okay, well, how do you feel that you could best talk to us about this project so that I've got it written down? Because obviously people need to have stuff written down, or they need to have stuff recorded or something like that. But if they can say to you, what's best for you? Is it best to give us a pitch audio file? So, and you can send it to us so that you're explaining what you want and you're getting it exactly right. James
that runs the podcast for me, One Fine Play, who helped the production company of these podcasts, he's obviously been listening to our conversations, and he's I don't know if he would have done this before, but the other day he sent me a message about an update on what was happening with everything, and he sent me a voice message on WhatsApp, and I just thought, that for me was amazing. That's all I needed, because either that's something he might do, I don't know, or he's listened to because if he had sent me an email, I wouldn't have read it correctly, I would have misread it, or he wouldn't have got read. But because it was in a voicemail, I understood everything, and I really appreciate that. I should probably tell him. I'll make sure I'll message him and tell him. So that's the best thing I've done. My PA reads all my emails, and with the longer ones, she bullet points the key information I need to know. Or just
But
find
you shouldn't have to have a PA to do that. Do you know what I
No,
mean?
I know,
It's
but
like,
people-
I mean, you obviously need a PA, but I mean, yeah, in theory, then all dyslexic people should have a PA, and that shouldn't be right. Like, surely the world needs to change if that's the case.
And that is exactly the point. Hopefully, this podcast will be a step in the right direction. So, if people need to find you, Jon, where can they find you? If they want to get in contact with you for anything, where's the best place to get you?
I have a website. It's Jon Holloway. Jon is spelled Jon Holloway, HOLLOWAY.co.uk.
Okay, well, thank you for coming on the podcast. It's been great.
Not at all. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you.
What a great conversation. Jon clearly has so much passion and confidence, and it's clear to see how he channels his invisible gift into being such an excellent photographer. He's so decisive and forward-thinking on the subject of dyslexia and neurodiversity, and it was fantastic to have him on the show. Hope you guys at home enjoyed this one. Jon, thank you for your time, and let's catch up again soon. On the podcast next week, award-winning artist and inventor Jim Rockas. I'm only going to tell you one thing. He's bringing a bottle of wine with him. If that isn't enough to get you to tune in, I don't know what is. Just a couple of quick notes before we go. They're important ones. First off, make sure to subscribe to The Invisible Gift wherever you listen to podcasts so you can automatically be notified about new episodes. One thing that's really important to me is to hear what you guys think about the podcast. I want to hear more about the challenges you're facing, what you're trying to change in your own life, work and family, and hear your inspiring stories of how you've overcome the odds to achieve the incredible. I know because so many of you are dyslexic that asking you to write something to me is not going to work. So I've worked with the production team on The Invisible Gift and we've come up with an idea. Grab your phone and record us a voice note. If you've got an iPhone, use voice memos. On Android, the options are endless. Once you're happy with your message, you can email it to me. My email address is andrew@theinvisiblegift.com. I would love to start sharing some of your audio notes and stories in future episodes. Also, and I'm really excited about this, head to theinvisiblegift.com because that way you can see the amazing artwork that has been commissioned to go along with each episode this season and also find out more about each of the guests I've had the pleasure of speaking to on the podcast. If all of this is way too much for you, I get it. I'm starting a newsletter that includes all this and more, and it will come straight to your inbox. It's so simple to sign up at theinvisiblegift.com. You've been listening to the Invisible Gift podcast, presented by me, Andrew Kitley, and produced by One Fine Play. This episode was recorded by Kazra. From One Fine Play, James Bishop is the executive producer. Kazra is the audio and visual engineer. Connor Foley is the editorial producer and researcher. Special thanks to Christina, Izzy, and the Cube Studios. Thank you for listening to the Invisible Gift podcast.